thanks again for your time. Well, today's topic, to launch or not to launch. I mean, you've got a church is going to start, but people are asking themselves when to do it and what's got to be done beforehand and whether or not there are points on which you wash your hands and step back. We really want to talk about launching churches and maybe what you think has to be in place. So what do you think are some of the key things that have to be in place before you would launch a church?
Yeah. You want to make sure that launch is something you only do once. And as soon as you launch, you go public. So you've now moved from the underground phase of just friends, contacts, people who are all close in. Launch means you're moving out into the more public sphere, which means people who come to a church that's launched will have certain expectations. Now you can pretend it's otherwise, but they will. They want to see at least 3 things in place, typically. So your public meetings will have to have sufficient quality. The music, the emceeing, the sermon, the preaching, all of that. You want to have in place a good kids' work. If you want to connect into families, right from the get-go, you've got to have a children's ministry that's doesn't have to be brilliant, but it's got to be the kind that parents are confident in and the kids come away not hating it. Glad to come back to. And third, you want to have a small group network thought through. So you want to have at least those 3 things upon launch. But further to that, you want to have also thought about how to make the most of the launch. As I say, launch is only going to happen once. So you want to think about how to make the most. That is, you have the potential to really kind of send this a fresh new church, new things starting. Possibly you'll get a whole bunch of new people there if you've done your work. So to make the most of a launch, good promotions, have I put in place sufficient marketing? Crassly, word of mouth, leafleting, website, notices in windows, if I made enough noise so that this launch really will get the best traction it can. And I would add to all of that, what do I do if 20 new people come? So I want to make sure I do have a good system of incorporating new people. Have I thought through how I'll engage with the new person when they arrive? Have I thought through the follow-up to that new person? Are there core members ready to befriend, get alongside, support? Is there an ongoing process afterwards to actually help those then connect into church life with us? So there's some big broad ones that you need to have in place.
Is there an ideal time? Do you have any opinion on when would you start? I mean, is it January the 1st? When do you think you should kick a church?
Yeah, very good question, mate. It's look, I do. I have making the most of a launch. There's in the Australian scene, I think south of Brisbane, let's say, I think there's a growth period in churches that typically happens December, January, February, March, maybe Easter.
Okay, so you do start at the beginning of the year?
No. So what I want to do is, when I start the church, I want to actually maximise the time through the growth phase. And so when I hit winter, numbers tail off, people get tired, colds, sickness and so on. So I want to maximise the time in the growth period, which means to start well before it. I think August, September is a good time to start a church plant so that the launch has happened, I've got initial enthusiasm, excitement. I've then worked through any teething problems so that as I come into the higher growth, I've got a long time through the growth period. So energy and momentum builds before I hit winter. Whereas if I start halfway through the growth phase, I get a short time in it before I hit winter. Now I think Cairns might be a little different. My guess is the growth phase isn't the hottest months of the year.
Well, listen, it's interesting you should say that some people, that you only get one bite at the launch. You only launch once. But are there phases in launching? You've heard of people talk about soft launches and launching as a small group and then launching as a pub. How does that work, and what's your opinion on that? Do you phase the launch, or do you really only have one go?
Well, I think you only do have one go at starting a church. Once it's started, it's started. You are public now. There are things that you can constantly do to re-energise. Now, we do that regularly. But any church can, of course, so that you can have a particular season where you build up momentum towards. So for us, it's January. We have a whole January series where it's particularly geared for outsiders. Again, though, if you're going to do that kind of thing and restart, re-energise, you've got to maximise lead up to it so that you get the best bite at it. But you don't get it again until perhaps 12 months later, and you've wasted an opportunity.
Andrew, is there a point on which a church plant might go so far south, so to speak, that it's just not working and you should pull back? Would you then say pull back and rethink and then maybe launch again at a later date? Or do you push through? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, there is some literature that says if you don't reach 200 in the first 2 years, it's never going to work, pull a pin. In the Australian context, if our churches are getting to 200 in the first 2 years, we are jumping for joy. I mean, it's just, that's a miracle, that's revival. So you've got to measure these things a little bit differently. Yeah, but of course, there comes a point that if a church just isn't getting traction, at some point you've got to call it and say, we finish this work up and try again at another time with another person, whatever. So part of going into planting is a determination as a planting couple whether we're up for 3 to 5 years typically of the slog. But if after 3 to 5 years you're not getting traction and it's just not moving forward, it's time to consider whether we close this down.
And Mikey Lynch, our mate, basically says that you've got to have a plan that incorporates failure, that you know what to do in the event that things don't work out, or at least what it looks like if it's not working out.
Yeah, I think for 2 reasons actually too. One reason, of course, is because if it's not working out, I want to know how in an honest, compassionate, godly way I can close things down. But the second reason I think it's actually, Mike is quite right, is that it helps me go into a plant with a greater sense of God's security